So good to be with your group today as we kick off a new series here at Simple Church called The Ripple Effect. Why the ripple effect? Well, have you ever been looking at a crystal clear body of water, quiet and calm? And then it all changes in a moment when you throw a rock into it, causing a ripple effect. Small waves that get larger and larger as they move away from the epicenter. And in a moment, this calm and quiet body of water is transformed into something new, a body of water filled with momentum and motion. Via one small addition to its whole, the entire thing is affected. But this idea isn't limited to bodies of water. Our world can seem set and unchangeable at times, like there is nothing you or I could do to make a difference. However, in the same way one small pebble can have a great effect on a body of water, a singular man, woman, or leader can cause a ripple so great and so grand that the whole world can be changed for good. It's as Mother Teresa once said, "I alone cannot change the world, but I can cast a stone across the waters to create many ripples." But ripples like this start with a choice. For a pond or body of water, it begins with the choice of someone picking up a pebble or rock and throwing it in. And for our world, it starts with the choice you and I make to do things differently than the rest, to act and live according to the ways of God rather than the ways of this world. And the greatest example we see of this is in the first 4 books of what's known as the New Testament in our Bibles, where we read about how God caused a ripple by choosing to take on the form of man and living in such a way that is still affecting us today over 2,000 years later. And I think most of us just shrug this off saying, well, of course, he was God. But he was also fully man. And being God, couldn't he have decided to act with a big splash instead of a small drop? But instead, he chose to do things this way. He chose to become a human and live and die and raise again. And it was done in such a way that a ripple was sent all throughout history. And in doing so, he not only sealed salvation for each of us, but also gave us an example of how we could live and cause similar ripples within our lifetime. And to help us do this, we're going to be unpacking one word throughout this whole series. A word that Jesus embodied as he lived here on earth. A word that if lived out will radically improve your life, make you happier, healthier, and more fulfilled. And it will grant you a legacy that will last beyond your lifetime. A word that will help you live for something more than just your own story. That will help you live with significance and fulfillment. And this word that I'm talking about is generosity. As I've already said, Jesus embodied this word. And it was his nature of love and generosity that we see creating ripples across time and culture and affecting us today. From simply noticing those that were overlooked and inviting them into greater purpose, to healing those that were diseased and crippled and written off, all the way to dying on the cross to pay the penalty for our sins, Jesus lived generously. And he lived as a human. And that's an important detail because it means he not only did it for us, but he also modeled it for us to do. In fact, this is exactly what he teaches his disciples in his final moments with them before heading to his death on the cross. Right before they sit down for their last meal, he shows a great act of generosity by washing their feet. The disciples are shocked. I mean, he's their teacher and their Lord. Why would he even consider doing such a thing for them? And that answer is recorded in John 13, 12 through 17, where we're told, after washing their feet, he put on his robe again and sat down and asked, "Do you understand what I was doing? You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that's what I am. And since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you ought to wash each other's feet. I have given you an example to follow. Do as I have done. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their master, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." Jesus isn't saying here simply go around and wash everyone's feet. Today that actually might be kind of weird. But during Jesus' time, it would have been seen as a great act of generosity. No, he is saying go out of your way to be a blessing to others. He's saying be generous, and in doing so, you will be blessed. But what exactly does it mean to be generous? And how can we do more of it? Well, that is exactly what we're going to talk about throughout this series. Talking about how generosity is more than simply giving money, but can also be giving your words, your influence, your time, or your belongings. talking about steps we can take toward becoming more generous and experiencing the blessing that comes from it. And so today, I would like to start with the first step to becoming more generous. But before we get into that, I would like to encourage you to talk as a group about this idea. So go ahead, pause the video, and be generous with your thoughts as you answer these questions together. So, what exactly does it take to become more generous? Well, I believe the first step to living a more generous life is found in another very important word, and that word is awareness. And that word awareness is such an interesting one, right? I mean, every day we experience millions of sights, sounds, tastes, touches, and smell, but we're only aware of a few of them. There are so many things that we should be aware of that we remain unaware of until we are made aware of them. And then there are those things that have been right in front of us that we weren't aware of until someone showed us we were missing it. And so today I would like to show you one of those things. And to start us off, I would like to ask about your awareness of something known as the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon, also known as the frequency illusion. Not sure? I'm not surprised. But I would be willing to bet you are more familiar with this phenomenon than you think. Ever thought about buying a new car? Maybe a certain make like Honda or Ford or a certain color like blue or red. And the moment you decide on that make or color of car, you start to see it everywhere. Like it just seems like everybody else has it now. Well, that is the Baader-Meinhof phenomenon. Because you see, the amount of cars in that specific make or color didn't increase. Your awareness of them simply did. And so you started to see them more and more. And this is interesting when looking at our culture today, where for many of us, it can seem difficult to be generous. We don't see how we possibly could be any more generous than we already are. While for others, it seems to come much more naturally. And certain people seem to be like the most generous people ever. However, the opportunities for generosity don't really change that much from person to person. But rather, one has become more aware of those opportunities than the other, so they see them more and more. And we can see this ring true time and time again throughout the accounts of Jesus' life, as we read about how he was constantly aware of opportunities to bless others with his generosity. Like the churning of water into wine at a friend's wedding, curing Peter's mother of a disease and illness, or healing a paralytic, or healing a diseased woman, and even feeding the 5,000. And the list goes on and on. The point is, Jesus never seemed to miss an opportunity for generosity. And so the question is, how can you and I become more like this? How can we become more aware of the opportunities we have for generosity? And I believe it starts with 3 easy steps. And the first is to pray. I mean, if God is the master of generosity and the creator of all things, it would be safe to assume he is the most aware of opportunities for generosity. And so it would make sense that the natural first step would be to go to him and ask him for awareness. And this could be as simple as a prayer asking God, please help me to see the opportunities I have to be generous today. And so if you desire to be more generous, I encourage you to start here. Start praying every morning and asking God to open your eyes to the opportunities he has for you to be generous. But then once we ask for our eyes to be opened, the next step is to look with our eyes. You can't become aware of something if you aren't looking for it. I mean, if you had a desire to meet someone new, but everywhere you went, you kept your eyes glued to your phone, would you really be able to expect that you'd meet anyone new? And so if you are asking God to help you become more aware of opportunities for generosity, but then keep your eyes and mind buried in the busyness of life, how can you expect to see any of those opportunities? So as you pray, I encourage you to look around for the opportunities God is providing for you. While at work, pay attention to coworkers and what their needs may be. While in the store, pay attention to other customers or employees and what needs they may have. Or while with friends or family, pay attention to their words and listen for any needs they may express. Because as you look for those opportunities to be generous, you'll become more and more aware of them. And as you become more aware, you will start to see them more and more. But then once you see an opportunity for generosity, the next step is to simply act. And I believe this is so important because it's one thing to see an opportunity for generosity and think about doing something, and it's a whole other thing to actually do something. And I think far too often we miss out on opportunities for generosity because we overthink it. What will they think? Can I really do that? What if someone else sees? What if I mess up? And all these thoughts do is put the attention back on us rather than the individual God has gifted us with the opportunity to bless. And I, for one, have missed out on way too many opportunities, turning the focus back on how things would affect me rather than how it could affect the person I have been given the opportunity to be generous toward. And so from my own personal experience, I encourage you, when you see an opportunity for generosity and realize you have the ability to offer that kind word, or realize you have the money to pay for that expense, or realize you have the time to offer your help, or you even realize you have the thought to make that call to lift somebody up, just simply do it. I mean, I will never forget the first time I began to experience this myself, as I saw others had this ability that I seemed to be lacking, to be really generous and loving toward other people. It didn't come naturally to me. So I began to pray, asking God, how do I become a more loving person? And I just remember sitting there and asking him that, and I remember hearing from him something along the lines of, Brandon, just start doing it. And so I said, fine then. Give me an opportunity to do it or whatever. And that day I was driving down the street and saw a man on the side of the road with a sign. And I had never really paid attention to those people before. You know, the people who were standing out with signs, I kind of just ignored them. But for whatever reason, this guy stuck out to me. And so I turned the next street and I began to ask myself, should I really? What if I do that? Does he really need me? But then I said, no, just do it. And so I swung into the parking lot where he was and got out and asked about what his needs were. And in doing so, found out he could really use a bus pass to help him get back on his feet. And so I thought to myself, well, I can do that. And so I went home, bought him a bus pass online, and brought it back. And the joy I saw on his face and the joy I felt in that moment as I got to share with him not only that bus pass, but that God cared enough about the details of his life that he would send me to provide for his needs, is something I'll never forget. And my prayer for you is that you would get to experience that same joy and blessing. And it all starts with increasing your awareness by deciding to pray, deciding to look, and deciding to act. And as you do, I guarantee you will not only begin to see more and more the opportunities for generosity that God gives you, but you also find it easier and easier to act on them. And in doing so, get to experience the blessing God desires for you. But for now, I encourage you to take the rest of your time as a group to talk about where and how this might start for you. Become more aware of your next step by talking through these questions together.